All right. Really great to have you here, Charles. And thank you so much for taking the time. I'm here together with Stig, the CEO of Norwegian Block Exchange. And I'm Øystein Hansen of Norwegian Block Exchange. And I basically do the Cardano community lead and Cardano staking at NBX. And we have with us Charles Hoskinson. And maybe we could start with introducing you, Charles, and maybe you can talk a bit about yourself. I know it's hard to do that, but I just want to preface this with I've been following the Cardano ecosystem for basically since the start, 8 years. And IOG, the company that's developing Cardano, has basically produced more than 184 research papers. So just the gravity of how much Charles has contributed to the industry is huge. So with that said, let's introduce who are you, Charles, and what do you do?
Well, I'm the CEO of Input Output. IOG, Input Output Group, is a venture studio. And what we do is we build Web3 projects in the space. And so we're most known for Cardano. And lately, we've been really focused also on Midnight. But then we have things like RealFi and Quantum Hosky. But what we look for is stuff that's dramatically transformational in either the economic, political, or social systems of the world. And we say, can we build something that is an ecosystem, meaning it's a multi-sided marketplace, it has lots of different people, it's self-sustaining, it's decentralized, it's recursively self-governing. And that thing that we build, can we build it in a way where once it's launched, we can build on it and do all kinds of really cool and interesting things. So for example, I built Cardano, now I'm building RealFi on Cardano, and RealFi allows me to bank the unbanked in Africa. It's something I've been wanting to do for 11 years. I did the TED Talk back in 2014 where I talked about it, and it felt like so far away and it's an impossible goal. But now we actually have the ability to do that. So we knew that this would require an unorthodox approach. And so what we did is kind of a public-private partnership where we brought the best universities together and a lot of great open source developers together. And we kind of built an army of scientists and engineers. And it gave us a really strong foundation so that we can, from first principles, understand how quickly can the technology evolve to solve economic, political, and social systems. So you start from the desire. Like a nation state comes to you and says, hey, I want to take the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund and put the whole thing on a blockchain. Or I want to take a voting system and put the whole thing for my nation on a blockchain. Well, that's a big ask because look at the value at risk and the social consequences of failure. There's 60 plus years of wise fiscal policy and saving that went into creating the sovereign wealth fund. You don't want to blow it all and lose it because you've just doomed the next generation to losing, that public trust. But on the other hand, you'd like to get like a 9% return because that's the difference between being able to not charge taxes and charging taxes. So there's a magic if you do these things the right way. So it's a risk return. So then you say, okay, are the systems ready for it? What are the security properties? What are the social properties? What's the usability component? What level of reliability do you need? How do people actually do this on a day-to-day basis? How do you answer that question if you don't have a first principles approach? You have to understand fundamentally when you look at things like zero knowledge proofs or consensus algorithms or whatever, when do they work and when do they not work, honestly speaking, and what are they useful for? So I've been part of crypto for basically the beginning. I was in 2010, and I've watched every generation, the first generation, the second generation, the third generation. We're heading into the fourth generation. And what's really exciting is we're starting to get closer and closer to problems at a scale of 1 billion people and trillions of dollars. The last generation was, millions of people and billions of dollars. The generation before that was hundreds of thousands of people and millions of dollars. So we're going up by a factor of 10 to 100 to 1,000, basically every generation, and we're almost where we need to be. So this last generation is what we're working on with Midnight, and there we're thinking about kind of the combination of three things. First is privacy, and it's not just privacy; it's like privacy enhancing technology. There's 4 big components to that. There's zero knowledge proofs, there's trust execution environments, multi-party computation, and fully homomorphic encryption. But all these things is the ability to take something and make it private with rules behind it at a scale. And there's flavors of technology to enable that. But that alone is not a USP. Like, who cares? You also have chain abstraction and you have smart compliance. So the institutional side wants to move all the securities, all the bonds, all of the regulated financial products into the cryptocurrency space. But they have this pesky thing called compliance. And crypto doesn't do compliance. We don't have identity. We don't do KYC. We don't do AML. So you need a way to make smart contracts do compliance and embed them into financial transactions. And then the chains can basically have a choose your own adventure based on where you're from. And then on the other side, the retail side, we're seeing the biggest shift in the industry since the invention of the smart contract with the invention of the intent. So you have chain abstraction, and basically what's happening is we don't really care where the transaction settles anymore. So it doesn't matter if it settles on Ethereum or Cardano or Bitcoin or wherever, because it's actually not where the transaction is origined. What's happening is, and the analogy I like using is, you go to Starbucks or a restaurant or something, say, I want a latte. You don't walk in and say, I'm going to tell you how to make a latte. Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. You just say, I want a latte, and they give you a latte. So analogously, you don't say, hey, here's how you trade a cryptocurrency step by step by step, and here's the gas fee and how Ethereum works and all this other stuff. What you do is you say, I want 100 ADA, no greater than this price within a day. And settle as fast as possible.
Charles, we'll touch upon intents later, and I just want to say, like, I don't think many companies could build such a vision like Midnight without all of that competence from developing several blockchains, and then not only the technical side, but also understanding all of the other layers of making that blockchain a reality, such as the governance layer and the social layer. So basically, like, for our viewers, like Charles and IOG, it's not only developing Cardano, it's Charles has followed the blockchain space since the start, as he commented on, and we'll touch upon a lot of these exciting topics that he just brought up here. Should we try to move on a bit? Like,
Sure.
Next, I wanted to introduce just a bit to our viewers as well, like, what is NBX working on with Cardano and Midnight? And we'll keep it short because we want to focus on you. But we're also been quite active with Cardano, and we're trying to work on stablecoins. We partnered with Moneta for issuing USDM in Europe. We were early supporters of the Night token. We have a Night validator. We're claiming for our customers and going to give Night tokens to our customers. We're active on the hackathons for Midnight, and we're also exploring like a Bitcoin active treasury with Cardano DeFi, basically, to increase the yield of Bitcoin. And that leads me to like the first question that will be more about in general, centralized exchanges, like, how can we try to be like positive and value aligned actors to what basically the protocol developers are doing? So what specific role do you see for these like more like digital financial service providers? We're trying to be more than just a centralized exchange. We're with the issuance of the stablecoin USDM. How can we try to be a positive force? Like, do you have any advice like for the new role of centralized exchanges going forward?
Is that to Stig or to me?
I mean, both of you.
Why don't you take that first?
Yeah,
I'm Italian, and I also am quarter Norwegian too. You know, my great grandmother actually came from Stavanger in Oslo, but so I can talk too much. So go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I can at least think of a little bit or mention what I think our role will be, and you will be part of it, Øystein, because we're in the same boat. But I think it's I think one of the partnerships that you actually didn't mention now, and it's quite new, so you didn't probably think about it. But we're working with Block ID. No, a BlockSign, which is a German company, which is basically building and have launched a kind of full-fledged custody solution for Cardano. which is something that has really been missing in the community. You have Fireblocks that is basically providing for most of the other blockchains, but really there hasn't been any good support for Cardano ecosystem, and especially like CNTs. It's like everyone now that is kind of stuck with Fireblocks knows that, okay, they're not supporting CNTs because you can't add night. So and one of the things that we're doing with them is that we are basically together with them, we're offering a custody solution for those who are not comfortable of being a self-custodian. So I think that is one of the kind of main roles that we will be. Obviously, it will be the bridge between kind of the traditional finance and bridging and onboarding people and companies into the ecosystem. But being part of that is also, I think, is the custodial role is very important.
I will add to that a bit. Like I see like a role like for like when you want to remain private with the Midnight, you basically sometimes want to do transaction with some regulatory requirements, and these regulatory requirements could be fed into the protocol, but you need specialized, localized knowledge of what are the regulatory requirements in your region. So we're issuing or planning to issue like the Polish stablecoin and also European version of URM, or the USDM of Europe, in partnership with Moneta as well. And we would then, like, for example, if you do a transaction on Midnight and you want to do it through this like collaborative economics there, and you do it with Dust, you might want to then feed into the data that Midnight protocol checks, like the various KYC ML requirements that you will need in Europe, basically. So I'm thinking maybe there's a role there as well, like in terms of this specialized knowledge that we can provide. Well, of course, the user still remains in control, and the protocol itself is the one that gives the check. Basically, you're good to go based on your DID, your data centralized identifier, and then the KYC requirements that they were. Okay, so yeah, that's what I am thinking.
Yeah, and I'll opine a little bit on it. I mean, exchanges, what's happening right now, if we're going to be honest and high fidelity to cryptocurrencies, is they're moving from a completely centralized custodial model to a federated model where you have subnets, where you have DEXs. They're still under the control because of regulatory reasons of the exchange, but now the actual swaps aren't happening synthetically with like fake ADA and fake Bitcoin, but they're happening with assets under the custody of a blockchain, and those representations follow deterministic rules. The reason why you want this is eventually you want to get to a proof of no MEV, a proof of nobody trading against you, no front running and bad behavior, and eventually you want to get to a point where no one has a privileged advantage over anyone else. So when you look at Cardano, it's actually made for these types of things. The combination of UTXO and Hydra, you get that local determinism. It's very easy to do roll-up proofs with the outputs. And with Hydra, you can get ultra-high throughput. And so there's already people experimenting, like Delta DeFi was the first in our ecosystem to launch a DEX on Hydra. And that's kind of like the shot heard around the world. You know, just like Sunday was the first DApp to launch, one of the first to launch. It doesn't have to be perfect, and by any means, there's a lot to do, but it shows the model and the thought process. So my view is the first exchange to operate that, then you get the whole banana, because you get implicit understanding of DIDs and cryptography, so you can create automated compliance, and your sign-on system is actually a signature, not a password and username. Okay, so you get much more secure entry and exit points. You can take all the wallet abstraction world that the Ethereum place has been working with, because they have tons of brilliant ideas about delegated authority and spending limits and all these other things. You can embed and pull that in, but then you get a blockchain-based settlement system, and you have high performance with that system, and you have perfect audit logs, but they occur in a layer 2, or they occur in a Hydra channel. So they're still under the domain and dominion of that exchange, and as a result, they don't clog the main net. But then by interfacing with it, I know there's predictable rules. I know under what circumstances I can deposit, and settlement is compliance. I know under what circumstances I can withdraw, and you don't run into a situation where, you know, the owner of the exchange wakes up and says, hey, I'm just going to like turn it off for a while, or I'm going to freeze all the transactions on this account, or this type of thing. The exchange operator is actually beholden to the same set of rules as the other group of people. So I think kind of this hybrid DEX, where it's not fully decentralized but it's not centralized, is a really, really good halfway house solution. And what's really cool is then you can get liquidity basically from everywhere, and you don't have a pre-existing business relationship with the customer. If settlement is compliance, they're transmitting with the transaction all of the automated KYC AML data, and if it passes your checks, it settles and you get custody of the funds. If it doesn't pass your checks, the transaction doesn't settle. So you never have a case where you get naked money that you then have to return, refund, file a SAR, or other things. The other thing is proofs work in both directions. So you get perfect travel rule compliance when you do a withdrawal from the exchange to another account. And Midnight is a great, complementary thing for this, because you can then add privacy as well to the order book and all the other things. So you can't measure what's going in and out of the exchange, and because people trade on that. And then you also don't know, certain large orders or other things, because, people want to divest large positions and buy large positions, and they have to do all this weird TWAP stuff to exit and enter the market and try to hide, and market makers find it and they're like, I'm going to eat you alive, and so the iceberging tends to fail. So if you have a private order book, you actually don't have those types of issues. You just you broadcast your intents, and solvers basically figure out how to solve that. And so I think that's the other side of it. It's like a much more fair way, and you get rid of high frequency trading. You get rid of a lot of the stuff that has plagued the conventional sex world.
Yeah, that's really good points. And NBX is actually having a proposal related to Hydra scaling on Catalyst, one of the grant programs for.
Yeah, one of the programs we're going to launch in 2026 is we're going to try to create a Hydra alliance and bring all the different Hydra people together. I talked to Adam Dean about it, and we've talked to Pi about it at Sunday and a few of these others, because we're all doing Hydra stuff. And at this point, we need to talk about Hydra 2. Hydra 1, we've learned an enormous amount of stuff. We've done a lot of stuff, but we need to get to 2. There's more to do. We have to extend the protocol. In fact, actually, the vast majority of people building on Hydra are now off specification. They've added things that weren't in the original Hydra paper. So what I want to do is create a fast working group where they basically write out a roadmap on a yearly basis, and then every 3 to 6 weeks, we kind of work on a reference core. And then people build modules in that core for like voting systems or micro payment systems or DEXs or things like that. And then we can amortize the cost of a lot of the Hydra stuff. Because, the bridge logic, how to get stuff in and out and incremental commit and decommit and all that, it's the same for everybody. So why in God's name do we have to implement it 8 times?
I think we will be very interested in looking into that. And we have a common problem probably with others. Like, we want to make sure we have disaster recovery. So what goes into the Hydra head, even if NBX were to be gone and stop operating, that the people were able to retrieve it when closing the head. So that's very interesting. Absolutely. But maybe we should take a step back and maybe for our viewers, really start to introduce Midnight. Where did it come from? How did it evolve into what it is now? And maybe put it in the wider perspective. In your whiteboard video, you talk about basically it's solving one of the big problems of internet itself, the fact that everything is public and we had to have password and all of these things. There was no private side to this or no identity side to this.
Right.
So maybe you can talk a bit about how Midnight came to be and how it fits into this wider picture of blockchain technology.
I just want to be honest with people, and the problem with blockchain is we're not honest with people. We keep promising we're going to change all the economic, political, and social systems of the world, but we're not going to live in a world where everything you've ever done, thought, and bought is public, available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and can be used against you at any time, and everybody can see it. I'm sorry. That's not the world I signed up for. It's not the world Satoshi wanted. It's just not these things. So we need to get the private side back with the public side. And you have to kind of ask some questions like, how do you make it useful? So where do you get the users from? And in 2026, you can't launch a layer 1 anymore. you have to be a meta chain. You have to actually get, because all the users are here. There's 550 million people. There's trillions of dollars of assets. It's like you're not going to go and just invent 500 million people out of thin air. It's organic growth across the board. So so Intents and real world assets are examples of new entry points. Same for Bitcoin DeFi to Cardano or XRP DeFi. These are examples of where we can get existing pools of users and have them come over and see something's there. But the core USP has to be that you add privacy to it. And privacy and escalation. So, how do you share without revealing? How do you collaborate without sharing the underlying word? There's different techniques. And so what I wanted to do was build kind of like the Swiss Army knife of privacy enhancing technologies and say it's just like ChatGPT, where, every year it just gets better. You have an API, you have an interface, you send a question in, you get a question out. And every 6 months, you seem to get something new. So similarly, I want to be like that for privacy-enhancing technologies. You send something into Midnight, it does something, and it sends it back, and you have some high assurance that that's done correctly. And the reason why us is because we have that army of scientists and that army of engineers. And why not you? Well, because it's not your core business model. If you're Uniswap, your core business model is not homomorphic encryption or multi-party computation, these things. Okay, your core business model is trading. So why would you want to go and spend all this money and distraction and go and build your own privacy stack? It's like equivalent to I'm doing a language translation app, so let me go build ChatGPT real quickly as a side quest and build $100 billion in servers and billions of dollars of model training and all this other stuff just so I can now have an embeddable AI. No, I'll just call an API and pay $50 a day for the API fees to basically do the translation for me in my app. That's how Web 2 works. That's how the API economy works. Privacy needs to work this way. So I said, why don't I build this for everyone everywhere? Why don't we build it with chain abstraction at the core? Let's build it with smart compliance at the core. Let's build it with privacy at the core. And every 6 months, let's just add capabilities to it and make it work with Ethereum and Solana and Bitcoin and Cardano. Now, why this benefits Cardano is Cardano dApps have first access to this new paradigm. So there's this question like, how do we compete? If you're a Cardano dApp builder, where do you get TVL from? Where do you get transactions from? Where do you get users from? You're not going to get users by saying we're slightly better, faster, and cheaper than Solana. That's what Sui tried to do, and all these other guys did. They spent $1 billion. They haven't gotten anywhere with it. You get it by doing different things, new things, interesting things, differentiating things. So a Cardano dApp that upgrades to add privacy-enhanced technology, it pays transaction fees in ADA. That's the way we designed it. And they can sell those services for all the bridge logic and other things to Ethereum users, to Solana users, to XRP users, and Bitcoin users. So that's where you're going to get your next million users from. That's where you're going to get all your transactions from. So that's another reason we wanted to build it. We were trying to think of a partner. A lot of times when founders do this stuff, it's parasitic. Dan Larimer was the canonical example. He went BitShares, then to Steam, then to EOS, and now he's talking about Revelation and biblical prophecy and these types of things. He's in a different world now, and I didn't want to be that guy. He's now Midnight, so I'm abandoning Cardano and everything. I want to say, could I build a protocol that if it existed, it would make Cardano more competitive and it would help the dApp and DeFi ecosystem of Cardano and make Cardano more decentralized at the same time? And that's the goal of Midnight.
Yeah, I recommend viewers also check out the whiteboard video. Charles talks a lot about this, like in terms of like collaborative economics and also like the fair intent. Like this is how you onboard corporations because they don't always want to disclose what they're buying, for example. That's the next step. Can I
ask a question before you go on, Einstein? So Charles, you obviously meet a lot of regulators, stakeholders, and basically the political leaders. What do you think? How do you feel about the timing to kind of introduce privacy into crypto now? It's like 8 years ago you would have you would have been like there would have been tortures and I don't know, forks and whatnot, but how do you feel it? How do you feel it's perceived now when you kind of introduce it?
Well, there's something called the smart cow effect. I raise bison, so I deal with it, and any rancher deals with it. And so the smart cow effect, cows are dumb, but there's that one cow that's too smart for its own good. It figures out how the fence works, and it can go and open the fence and do something with the fence. Well, the minute it does that, it leaves. And then all the other cows see this cow leaving, and they're like, we're going to follow that cow. So then all your cattle get out because that one damn smart cow. Countries and regulators are exactly the same. Most of them are herd mentality. They're cows, they're grazing, they're very happy, the life is very simple. But there's that one regulator that's really smart, and they want to do something innovative and different, mostly because they want to steal business. They want to get people to their jurisdiction. And what they do is they embrace a new way of regulating, and they start getting exponential returns. And then all the market incumbents are like, we're getting we really want to be like these guys because they have this huge structural advantage. And if we don't get that advantage, we're going to lose all this business. So then the regulators are like, well, shit, we need to adopt. So right now, your fastest regulators in terms of crypto are places like Singapore and Abu Dhabi and Dubai, and they have sandboxes that allow you very quickly to talk about smart compliance and automated regulation and these types of things. What I want to get to is a public-private partnership where the government tells you the standards, the industry writes the software, the government certifies the software. Then you have libraries. You have the Norway library and the Germany library and the American library. And then as a smart contract developer, to be in compliance, I just call the library and it acts as an additional part of the settlement pipeline. So it goes from Ethereum to the Norway contract to your smart contract. And as long as it passes through that way, settlement is compliance. And then it automates tax compliance, automates reporting, selective disclosure, all these types of things. And then what the regulator does is every year they just basically create new standards and they create new certifications. So it's software update. Well, what's great is that it means you get rid of your compliance officer. You never have to file a SAR again. And also the libraries are write once, run everywhere. So large companies will probably write those as a consortium, and then small actors get to use them for free because they're all open source. So it massively amortizes and reduces the cost of regulatory compliance, and it also forces the regulator to do work. The problem with the regulation right now is it's small regulator, big net. So they'll say like, oh, well, we only want to have 500 people, but we're going to force every bank to file suspicious activity reports. And we're going to force everybody to collect KYC and AML data and all this other stuff. So in other words, you, the private industry, are going to be the investigator and then tell us everything. And if you don't tell us stuff, we fine you. So in other words, they don't face the consequences of their mandates and laws. They can have all these unfunded mandates that they push through, and then the private industry has to adhere to it, but the regulator doesn't have to do any work for all that stuff. When you create a public-private partnership, they actually have to write the specification of what they want, which means every time they ask for something, they have to write it down and actually get it implemented and certify it. So they'll start saying like, man, maybe we don't need 46,000 regulations or 1 million pages of tax code or these types of things because I really don't want to do all that work. Maybe we can consolidate somewhere, simplify somewhere, clean this mess up. So it's all about incentives at the end of the day. And it's a combination of move fast jurisdictions. Then private industry starts complaining to their regulators and they have economic agency. And when BlackRock complains, somehow the government always just does it. And then they update their regulations. And then you move to a public-private partnership where both sides have something to do. And then what you do is if you do it the right way, small industry actually is on the same footing as large industry because the compliance costs will be the same at NBX as it is for JP Morgan Chase. Yep. And the network will automate 95%. And then things like Midnight can do all the selective disclosure and these other things. So you still preserve and protect the privacy of the customer because you're just asking a collection of questions. Is this pre-tax money or post-tax money? What's the country of origin? All this other stuff. But you never really say, is it Stig or Einstein or, any of these types of things. It's not necessary for settlement.
I love that answer, and it also puts the shoulder burden of this like on both sides, both the regulator and the actual user. So you sort of eat your own dog food, and you get used to, you see what's the needed regulation basically. So that is brilliant. And I will add to that, like from my perspective, like the fact that dust regenerates, so Midnight has this dual token economics, like it also means this is like a fairly safe playground to do these things. Like you can have updated regulations because you will regenerate and whatever Yeah, you want to
let's talk about that dual tokenomics because it captures so much, and it blows my mind that more people haven't done it. So we have the unstoppable force against the immovable object, and they collide into each other. So what's the unstoppable force? People want crypto to go up. Okay, let's be honest. They want crypto to go up. Okay, so they like deflationary monetary policy, and they like value appreciation over time. So that's the unstoppable force of crypto. Well, the immovable object is businesses want predictability. Mm-hmm. They want prices to stay fixed or grow at a predictable rate. So how do you have a token that's both speculative and consistent at the same time? That's why we created stablecoins, because we just want that and we need that to counterbalance the speculation of Ether and all this other stuff. Well, the problem is stablecoins aren't currently used commonly to pay for gas fees. Now they can be, and a lot of people are discussing ways to do that. So we said, why don't we create a dual tokenomics where you have one resource that's like Bitcoin and ADA. It's fixed monetary policy, it's deflationary, it's the governance consensus token, and all the things you come to expect. But then have it generate another resource with a floating monetary policy that can change over time. And the goal of that is kind of threefold. One is predictable pricing over the long term, so you can kind of understand what it costs to use the Midnight Network day by day. Two, you can pay in any currency you want through a capacity exchange. Mm-hmm. So, talk about intents. You just like Babel fees. You say, hey, I want to pay an Ether, I want to pay an ADA, and then somebody has the dust to do that. But three, it enables the Web 2 business model. Web 2, do you pay a token every time you do a Google search? Do you pay a token every time you create a Facebook post? No. And that's what billions of consumers currently are trained to do. Meanwhile, in crypto land, anytime you want to do anything at all, you have to have the asset, you have to spend the asset. And you have to pay up front. The user pays. So if you have Knight generate dust, you can delegate your dust to your users. So what you can use is create an NFT or some object that represents a rate limiting, and you just give it to them and then say, okay, this entitles you to X amount of transactions per day or something for free inside the system. So they don't have to have a wallet. They don't have to have the underlying asset, and they're already rate limited, and they never even know what crypto is. So it allows Midnight to adopt the Web 2 business model as well. And I think that's going to be great for user acquisition.
It's so interoperable, because it generates every time. You can use it for any assets in the future. So it's a really powerful idea you have there implemented. I want to touch upon a topic that's near and dear to me. It's I was active in Cardano governance, and I saw basically personally how much IOG placed value on empowering people, basically. And it's in the Cardano constitution, it's reflected there, and it's in one of the input-output group's guiding principles as well, to empower humans. So I want to ask you, how does Midnight work to empower humans? I already see one myself. It's like this way to express intent without harm. So if I'm let's say I want to have a loan and I'm too ashamed to ask for it, like I'm a small business, I can maybe do that and actually selectively disclose to whoever donates to me, but I don't need the rest of the world to know that. I'm really curious, how do you see Midnight can enable this human empowerment, and maybe touch upon RealFi if it relates to this topic?
So Midnight, the governance for it, we're doing everything the way we should have done for Cardano. We didn't know what we were doing with Cardano, so we had to kind of learn, because, what's the fucking user manual to build a cryptocurrency? It's you learn as you go. And we got there, and actually Cardano is awesome, and there's a lot of amazing lessons and good points there, and it's a great ecosystem. But with Midnight, you have this 4-phase launch, and phase 1 is just get the token out there, get it listed, get liquidity, get trading. We, for a while, were trading in the top 5 of all cryptocurrencies, $9 billion of volume. Pretty happy about that. I wish NBX could get some of those fees.
Thank you.
So it was good for all those people. But then you build a community, and you have what's called a tractor aggregator strategy. So you use all these different events to aggregate people into, instead of X, which is a cesspool of crap, into Discord and other places where you can moderate and have productive, meaningful conversations with people. Then you build up your ambassador class. And we did that pretty well with Cardano, but we'd like to make it even better with Midnight.
You learned some lessons.
Yeah, a lot. Yeah. Those ambassadors and that good aggregation point gives you the ability to build good culture, and you build around a common mission. freedom of association, commerce, and expression.
Yes.
You should always have, as a human right, the freedom to associate with the people you want to. As a human right, you should have commercial freedoms and buy the things and participate in marketplaces you want to. And you should always have the freedom to express yourself without fear of retaliation or reprisal. So that's your kind of your philosophical core. And then you derive economic rights from those, and that becomes your constitution. So when you look at the rollout of Midnight, right now it's liquidity. The next phase will be getting all the dApps turned on, so we'll have a federated mainnet and get all those developers, and we should have done that with Goguen, because then we'd had 2-3 years of smart contract development before the big unveiling. And so that gives you time to get all your use cases and utility in, because you think of cryptocurrency, it's infrastructure, utility, and experiences. It's not good enough to launch infrastructure. You have to have utility, things you do, and experiences, how you do them. So you got to get your wallets on board. You got to get stuff to do, all this type of stuff. Then phase 3 is infrastructure, people. So get the stake pool operators and do another incentivized testnet, just like we did before. But now you're doing it with a complex network, not a toy network. And then finally, you bring it all together and you turn on the full decentralization and you start phase 1 of governance. And instead of a hardcore, like federated oligarchical aristocracy to full decentralization, we're going to moderate that and do it in more chunks. So we already started a members-based organization. We have a DAO-like organization. We already have a foundation that actually cares about the nitty-gritty details of these types of things and is willing to invest money in these types of things. So there's a lot of elements that exist here that are just fundamentally different from the elements that exist with Cardano. Right. And what's nice is you can leverage those elements with a good curated community to get a much more pure constitution. And we have a lot more options because, for example, the governance structures of Midnight can be put on Midnight. Midnight is the single best place in the industry to run a DAO. The reason why DAOs don't work very well is everything you do in a DAO, from how much you pay your employees to your intentions, all this stuff, your strategy, is public forever. Yeah. And a lot of people don't feel comfortable working for a company where their HR complaints are public and their salaries public and these types of things. So what if you have a private side and a public side, and you can actually have a hybrid shim with like a Wyoming DAO and run part of it on the chain? So this gives us not only the ability to have an on-chain constitution, you can have an on-chain constitution with an on-chain DAO and have much more sophisticated governance structures because of the privacy components. So we're going to be exploring those very deeply, but you do it in phases. Even turning on other chains. It's like you don't turn all the chains at once. You do first Cardano Midnight, and all the dApp builders in Cardano get right of first refusal, and they get to take advantage of that. Yeah. Then Midnight Ethereum, Midnight Solana, Midnight Bitcoin, and every 2 months or 3 months you launch one. So you have like 18 months of launches. And as you do this, you add to the governance along the way. And you go from checked and balanced, good federated structures to DAO structures, and you get better voting systems as well. And you have a more anonymous ballot with the voting system. So you can even actually entertain the idea of like dual DREPs, like shadow DREPs and transparent DREPs. So we've been talking about that. So shadow DREPs would be that they can vote, but you don't get to see how they voted. And then people can decide, do they want to delegate to shadow DREPs or do they want to delegate to non-shadow, public ones. And so there's a lot of stuff there that can exist. And we're real excited to explore those. And with Midnight, the goal is fast. Every 2 to 3 months, something has to ship. Yeah. So we launch in December. We're going to have some major announcements in Hong Kong in February at Consensus. Mainnet's right along, and we're working real hard on it. We almost got the RTM cut on the testnet side. Then right after that, we're going to be working that thread, working the ITN thread, and then getting Jolt in it. But every 2-3 months, it's got to be shipping, got to get stuff out. And it's brutal for the people. It's extremely hard to maintain that pace, but we're keeping it.
I have personally seen like Midnight Foundation, and we have had contact with them in NBX, and they have been moving very fast. So we're quite impressed with that. Should we move on to more about if we have managed to get all of these users to Midnight? One question on my mind is scaling. So doing zero knowledge proof, as far as I know, it's something that is quite computational intense. I'm really curious about your takes about how do we solve scaling on Midnight-related topics. For us in NBX, we're interested in this with stablecoins. We're investigating Hydra, but what do you see the future of scaling technology holds on Midnight, and maybe how you preserve privacy while scaling as well?
So when you look at a zero-knowledge system, there's 7 layers to it. So that the top level is kind of your trust assumptions about the setup of the system, and then you kind of start working your way down the layers, and you start talking about things like the languages that you use, and then how witnesses are generated. So what's off-chain and what's on-chain, and then you have to compile it into mathematics because you're solving a math problem. So that's called the arithmetization of the system, and then you have the kind of the proof backend. So like, how do you solve those proofs and handle that mathematics? Then you have the underlying cryptography, and then you have the broader infrastructure upon which it all runs. So what's the blockchain component of it? Now, every layer of that system has trade-offs, trust assumptions, and is optimized for certain sets of use cases and problems. So for example, you can have a general purpose like we do with Compact, which is based on TypeScript, or you can have circuit specific like Compact or Noir. And circuit specific means you do one thing, but you do it really efficiently. So you see this with like our R1 CS systems with Cross 16. And so those are like privacy transactions or things like Zcash or whatever. You want to make it as efficient as possible. So what we try to do with Midnight is build a general purpose proof engine. The problem is with that, it doesn't scale out of the box. You have to do more to make it scale. So what you have to do is build a multi-layered system, and you have an aggregation layer, and then you have a settlement layer. So you have a layer where everything gets submitted to, and you kind of batch them either as a roll-up, or you batch them as a fold or recursion event. So there's different techniques that you can use. And then you have one large proof artifact, and that proof artifact represents thousands to tens of thousands to millions of events. And then you settle that one block on the main chain. So you never build a network like Midnight in isolation. You always build it with the scaling solution in parallel. And you have to create it in a way where your trust assumptions are realistic and reasonable on both sides of the coin. So Kachina, Halo 2, Plonk, the BLS, all this stuff, 12.381 is like that stack that we have is the settlement side of the stack. And in February in Hong Kong, I'm going to talk a lot about the second part of the stack, which is the scalability component of it. Because also, if I'm doing chain abstraction, I'm going to be getting inbound intents from Ethereum and Bitcoin and all these other things. So there's a possibility we could be processing millions of transactions an hour. And if every one of them has to be a zero-knowledge proof and settle on the chain, it's not tractable with any zero-knowledge system, not just the ones we've chosen, but any. So you need some form of a roll-up system, or some form of a recursion system, or some form of a folding system. So we're looking at a bunch of different folding technologies, and actually, personally, I've been writing code on some of them, where I took and wrote a TLA plus specification for something called Jolt. But we also have a lattice-based folding system that we're working on right now called Nightstream, and it's based upon principles from Neo and Lattice Fold. So there's a lot of amazing technology that helps you with the aggregation and batching part of this, where you can take these things and put them together. And typically what you do is you layer different technologies. So you layer MPC and TEE for your aggregation and batching side, and that's a subset of your consensus set. And then you combine that with a fully decentralized settlement layer inside the system. Then you get the best of both worlds, because you don't inflict the enormous hardware requirements of the rollup system or the recursion system on your average consensus node. I don't want a situation where everybody has to have 4 GPUs, 500 gigabytes of RAM, and 100 gigabit internet connection to participate in consensus. That doesn't make sense. But on the other hand, if you want it to be fast and linearly scale, you do need consensus nodes that have an enormous amount of compute power, because they're going to be processing a ton of inbound for all that stuff. So you have to layer network topologies as well, and you have to have a way of putting them together. What's really cool about Midnight is it's always been kind of a 3-layer model. You have Cardano at the base, you have Midnight, and then you have this idea of these subnets that basically do the heavy processing of the system. And we designed a multi-resource consensus algorithm, Minotaur, specifically for that. So it really helps us figure out how to put those different components together inside the system. And boy, it's been a lot of fun to put all these pieces together. The good news is like a lot of the heavy lifting has actually been done on the Ethereum side, because they were a little ahead of us on a lot of the scale concerns, because they have so many transactions and they're doing these starks and snarks and roll-ups and this and that. And so they spent years and years and years building ZKVMs and roll-up systems and folding systems and writing papers and billions of dollars, and collectively,
Is that Eigenlayer, I think?
Eigenlayer is an AVS system, but you have like your Starkware with snarks. And these Espresso is another. There's dozens of these types of things. They all have great ideas, but they're not put together in the right way. They're just talking about scale. They're not necessarily talking about intents and privacy at the same time.
Yeah.
And we are, along with identity.
Yeah, that's such a huge important point. Like, basically, you want the privacy to remain in your hands. Like, if you leave someone else to do the computational proofs for your privacy, then the privacy is not in your hands anymore. If you can do it on your mobile, then the privacy is in your hands, basically.
Yep.
Yeah. That's a great answer. I don't know, Stig, if you want to follow up, but I want to touch upon that in terms of like the question of fragmentation. So you have all of these different blockchains that can work together and even maybe do consensus together. I believe that's in the Minotaur paper, like where you can have proof of work and proof of stake together. But how do we solve or avoid like fragmentation? What's the glue that keeps all of this together when all of these different activities comes from all of these different chains to midnight? Like for us, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, well, remember that consensus protocols are designed for failure. So Byzantine resistance doesn't mean 100% of the people do the right thing and commit the right thing. You're saying you can tolerate some of the people not being around or doing nonsense. So when you do multi-resource consensus, what you're doing is saying that you don't have to have all the chains be in sync and everybody be honest. Just the majority has to be where it needs to be. And if you do your pairings right, it's never an issue. But what's really cool is that this technology is super complementary. Like Near has chain signatures, and they're awesome. And the Near team is a really smart, really talented team, and they do amazing work. Chain signatures are write only. They can modify the state of other chains, so they can spend money in Ethereum or spend money in Bitcoin, but they're not read. Near network has no ability to watch Ethereum or Bitcoin or Cardano or these other things. They have to use oracles or trusted parties to inject that information in the system. Well, if you have multi-resource consensus, your consensus nodes are running full nodes, or at least observing all the networks you're touching. And if you have roll-ups or folding, then what you can do is fold the entire state of the system. So you can prove to midnight with your consensus set that the things you're seeing in Ethereum or asserting in Ethereum or Cardano or Bitcoin are real. The coins haven't been double spent. They exist. You have state proofs on the wire for everything is PCD. Okay, so that's a massive competitive differentiator when you look at this type of stuff. It's not just, hey, let's use chain signatures to control accounts in other systems, but then let's also use Minotaur to observe other systems. And Minotaur has built in all these security guarantees about waiting. So if one network is consistently unreliable, you can dynamically allocate consensus and say, okay, now instead of 30% of our consensus is going to come from Ethereum validators, only 10% is going to come from them now, or we're going to drop them from the consensus set because they don't meet the minimum threshold. So self-regulation of the system through rolling averages of performance and the appropriate selection of the validator set and blending of validator techniques like proof of work with proof of stake and other things, really you can get extremely strong thing. We saw that with the Glacier drop. We had like an airdrop style mechanism, but then we have mining with the scavenger hunt. Everybody wanted to mine midnight. They had a lot of fun with it, and it was great. Overwhelming participation. So it's already a hybrid system. It's kind of a proof of stake system and a proof of work system in one.
Yeah, and I think it's so strong idea for the resilience of blockchain in general to have these like multi-consensus protocols. So it's strong for the industry as a whole. So I see we have touched upon a lot of topics. Stig, is there any topic you want to ask as well?
No, I see time is running out, so I guess you saved the best for last, or?
Yeah.
I'm good. I'm guessing we have one question, right? That's when Quantum Hosky. Is that the final question?
Yeah, we have a CNT marketplace. We have Hosky. We're actually fans. Like some of the developers went to the Hosky summit, so we're curious when's the rollout of Quantum Hosky.
Well, we're in deep build mode right now, and we're working on it. We're working on it really, really hard. The core of Quantum Hosky is asking the question of, can you create a SimCraft game in a 4-dimensional space? So SimCrafts, crafting game like Minecraft, that type of experience, simulation game, watching an alien ant farm, watching AI do stuff. So you're playing with bots, and the bots are intelligent. And a 4-dimensional space, well, spatial dimensions, you have X, Y, and Z. We're pretty used to that. But now I've added W. Okay, so you have an extra spatial dimension. It's not time, it's an extra spatial dimension. And so we don't have any intuition for spatial dimensions, but as kids, we all grew up with extra spatial dimensions. So, you play Mario Brothers, and that's a 2D world, and you're on this side, and then you kind of go left to right, right? Well, what if you take a piece of paper in ambient 3D world? All right, so I have this coffee mug right here, right? Okay, so if the piece of paper is here, if you're Mario, that looks like a coffee mug. You see the edge of it. But what if I move the plane? Now there's no mug. It disappears.
You see slices.
You see slices, right? Yeah. So what's a 4D world? You take a cube instead of a sheet, and now you're moving your cube around a 4-dimensional space. And so stuff disappears. And it actually means humans are hollow in 4-dimensional space. You could look into a human. You can see their heart and their lungs and everything, because we're closed in 3D space, but we're open in 4D space. So how do you build a building game where you have an extra spatial dimension? Because you build a house, but your house is hollow. You've closed it off in 3-dimensional space, but you've only closed it off for your slice of the space. So the first major challenge, and this is why you have a Norwegian mathematician, doing this, Trim. Yeah. He's the product manager. The first step is, how do you make an interesting 4D SimCraft game? Then, after you've done that, you have to do the je ne sais quoi. You have to make the game really interesting and fun and playable, and add a lot of great content. So we ask questions like, what are the consequences of living in a game with intelligent, non-human players? And how do we make that really a unique experience? And then how do you build lore that's appropriate? And then also, how do you create purpose inside the game? And then how do you take advantage of the blockchain side of it? Like, how do you make the token in the game an indispensable component of the gameplay, not a value add tack on, like loot boxes or things like that? And for crafting games, it's actually quite straightforward, because it's a preservation of the work that you've done. And then also, we wanted to add quantum effects inside the game. So we had a proof of work algorithm using random quantum random number generation.
Quantum beacon or something like that?
Yeah, it creates a quantum beacon in the game. And then what the quantum beacon does is it solves the problem of resource exhaustion, because you need to reset parts of the world. So if the quantum beacon entangles with parts of the world that aren't locked down, it'll randomly repopulate that part of the world to replenish the resources that are there. So your quantum beacon, the more participation, the more randomness and change you get inside the system. So it's not only a great gameplay mechanic, it's a utility, because also it makes Quantum Hosky the best source of random numbers in the entire world. And then we're going to implement Ouroboros Chronos with Quantum Hosky, so we can replace NTP. Wow. So we can do make the best clock in the world as well inside the system. So there's a real utility as an API for it. And then what's cool is a SimCraft game. Mods are a big part of Minecraft, and they're a big part of any of these games. So what are we going to do? We're going to enable people to build their own mods. And what are those? Those are apps inside the system. So it's a smart contracting system under the hood for decentralized game building, you see, and it'll be a partner chain of Cardano. So we'll use the Glacier Drop model that we pioneered with Midnight. We'll, obviously reparameterize it and change it for the needs of Quantum Hosky. But all the lessons that we've learned from building Midnight, we can carry into the building of Quantum Hosky and bring that into market. So we're in deep building mode this year, and it's all about how do we make a fun 4D game that's in the SimCraft genre. And then next year is going to be about how do we translate that into something that can actually hit market as an early release, like Baldur's Gate did, and then kind of walk our way through it systematically, like expansion packs or your hard forks, So it's pretty cool. You can map the game parlance on. By the way, the Web 2 model solves that whole user pay versus provider pay thing. Having a gas model like Midnight does with Quantum Hosky means you don't have to necessarily have a token to have people play inside that game. So there's all kinds of new business models to adopt, the use of it. You can even pay in a stable coin for the game as well.
Wow, very, very excited to that. And that just shows the power of this partner chain model, and basically also how this is certainly not draining Cardano. It's certainly contributing, like with all of these.
ADA holders are going to get a drop for Quantum Hosky.
There you go.
There you go.
I want to close the interview with some my own personal take, and then maybe if you have some final thoughts and encouragement. But I want to say to Charles, I'm not the most experienced interviewer, but it's been an honor to have this interview with you, and just all of the work you have done over the years for the whole industry. And I hope you have remain the fun of it. Do you have the joy of it? Because this industry can be tiring sometimes, and I've seen it sometimes on you in some of the AMAs. But I just want to see just from a scientific perspective, all the contributions, over 180 research papers as far as I counted, and how you're making sure we have more rights for people, with privacy. That's so important in the times we are in now. I'm so grateful. So thank you so much for doing this for the industry and involving it.
Yeah, I mean, we're both very passionate people, and we feel if we didn't care, it would be a lot easier, because no matter what happens, you're just kind of neutral. But that's one of the reasons, for example, why I chose a different strategy for X, this year. I did an audit of all of my tweets in 2025, and I used a bunch of complex scripts. And on average, 7 out of 10 replies were either partially or completely automated, which means that 70% of the people I'm talking to aren't even people. They don't exist. Then the average sentiment, negative sentiment, was 66%. And 33% was positive to neutral. So I had a 1 out of 10 chance of talking to a positive human being.
Yeah, that's it.
2 out of 10 chance of talking to a negative human being, and then 7 out of 10 chance for talking to nobody. So I was like, what am I doing? This is nuts. It's become a cesspit. So you say, well, you don't abandon it. What you do is you say, well, if they're bots, I can be a bot too. And I have better AI people, so I can be the best bot you've ever seen. And I can also create a council of people to help manage that account. Yeah. So I can create a hybrid account, and we get the value of the broadcast to 1 million people, but we don't take the human toxicity. And I've been incredibly happy over the last 6 days.
Oh, that's good to hear.
It's been the best transition ever, and it's made me a lot more pleasant and happy. And and I don't miss it at all. I haven't had any desire to go back.
Okay. Any New Year's resolutions or anything you're excited for 2026? Let's close it with that one, maybe.
Well, so everybody wants the mountain peak, but they're not prepared to pay for the valley. You have an upside, downside. You have hardcore work. You have to have downtime. And so one of the things I've been in work mode for so long is I haven't given myself the downtime. And I absolutely need to get back to, health and wellness and regeneration and, feeling better about these things, because I'm very, very tired and very, very worn out. And so after we get past this next big leap with Midnight and get RealFi ready for launch, I'm going to take a little bit of time off and lose all that weight I've accumulated. Unfortunately, it's too easy. I'm going to travel significantly less. So I'm doing one last travel surge for Midnight. I'm going to Japan for the Japan tour, and then I'm going to go to Hong Kong. But then after that tour, I'm not going to travel very much for the rest of the year. I'm going to stay in Wyoming and Colorado, and I'm just going to do interviews like this. And I think we'll get a lot more long-term value out of it. And it's been good to just write code again, and it's been good just sit down and think again and have fun again. I wrote probably 2,000-3,000 lines of TLA code, and I haven't done that in 10 years. And so
in 3 days?
Yeah, it was a lot of work.
Okay. I think we'll close the interview there, and Stig.
I just if you're still recording, it's like we just want to thank you, Charles, for taking time. It's like you're one of the most busy men in crypto, and setting aside 1 hour for a small exchange up in Norway. It's we really appreciate that.
Oh, I'm not joking about being Norwegian. I would eat lefse, and I'd spend time with my great grandmother, and my dad is 50% Norwegian, grandmother's 100%. So we have a lot of Norwegian family, and I love Norway. Tromsø is one of my favorite places to go, and it's just real cool to go hunt some reindeer and go to Finland and chase the aurora borealis and try not to get killed in an ice crevasse. It's such a beautiful country, and it's sad that it's not as business friendly, because I always tried to find an excuse to set up a business in Norway, and I really wish that they would create sandboxes for foreigners like Dubai and Abu Dhabi have, because I would have an office in Oslo if that was the case.
Oh wow!
We have a desk for you if you want. So
yeah.
All right. Thank you so much. I'll close now.
Thanks, guys. Cheers.
Bye.